32 teams in 32 days. This is episode 24, the New Orleans Saints episode. Let's welcome in John Hendrix, Saints reporter for Saints News, Sports Illustrated. John, what's going on?
Not too much, man. Just trying to stay dry. We've had a lot of crazy storms come through the area, so it was nice to see sunlight for a change yesterday.
Yeah, it's like 65 here in Missouri. It's gonna snow tomorrow, so it hasn't snowed in a couple months, and right in the middle of April, just 3 inches, boom. but
That's wild.
Yeah. Well, let's talk some Saints. So they did it, right? They got out of salary cap hell. Think it was as high as $90 million over the cap at one point, but they did it. It was expected. The people that said, "Oh, they're going to go 0-16, they can't get out of this mess." I mean, come on. It took a lot to do it. What did you think of this roster turnover?
Yeah, I think a lot of it was expected, and I think obviously the first domino to fall was the Drew Brees move, and obviously, he kind of hinted that early on, and I think we all felt in the media that hey, this was kind of it for him. Because if you would have asked me, last year before, or even when this became a thing, I think I guess starting in 2015, 2016, when the Saints were just putting together those string of 7 and 9 seasons, I never got the sense that Drew was done, that he wanted to hang it up. And, this came along, and obviously you saw the body language, him being able to be on the field with his family after after the Tampa game with that playoff loss. And you just got a different vibe, because normally he always is on the field with his family playing, but because of COVID and everything that happened, you just never got to see a lot of that. And it's just really reminiscent, players taking the time and stuff. So that was obviously the big domino to fall. But a lot of the players that they did, we knew they could shuffle and restructure money. It's kind of basically kicking the can down the road. And as far as it goes, none of the players that were released were really that much of a shock. Janoris Jenkins, I think, was probably the one that people thought, you probably can keep this guy, but it could have gone either way. I think that was really the biggest loss. Quan Alexander was expected. Morstead, we kind of thought he was playing a little hurt last season, didn't really push the issue, but that was a tough loss because he's one of the remnants of the 2009 Super Bowl team. But other than that, they did the new moves necessary, and now they're in a spot where they've been able to re-sign some guys, some key players, and get some new talent in there, and they have 8 picks at their disposal. So I don't expect them to use it all, but a lot of good things still to come in New Orleans.
Yeah, and this is a team that's had one of the best rosters in the league over the last 5 years. I remember in 2017, after that great draft, and going forward to 2018, they were a consensus top 5 roster. Now, without some of those pieces, Sanders, mostly pieces on the defense, but without some of these guys who have been here forever, been here, through, I guess, Drew Brees' second part of his career, where he had those 7-9 seasons of missing the playoffs and made it 4 or 5 straight years and just came short a couple times. What are the Bensons thinking? How does this team keep moving forward with all these new players, all these new faces around?
Well, look, I think they still have a lot of great leadership, and obviously Demario Davis is somebody that obviously comes to mind is going to help fill that role. Cam Jordan obviously is another one defensively, and they're going to have to get guys to step up, because there is a leadership void that kind of gets left after all of this stuff. But look, no matter how the quarterback plays out and how that actually goes, I think it's Jameis Winston. I think he's going to win this competition. I think he's got to be the favorite going into this season. And again, he's not that far removed from being a 5,000 yard passer and all these other good things. So he does a lot of good things. Obviously the knack on him is his turnovers, right? And I think he can cut down a lot of that. And if you peel back the layers on those turnovers, a bulk of those came against just 5 teams, 5 games. And, for him, he's got an opportunity to be a leader on this team. I think younger players like Alvin Kamara or Ryan Ramczyk, some of those guys that you drafted to change the face of this organization and been able to be a key integral part. Malcolm Jenkins is another one. He came back on a second stint here, and he's obviously a leader. So I think they've got a good bit of leadership and a good nucleus here. They just need to make sure that they keep drafting some good pieces to help them stay a contender, because right now I think a lot of people are sleeping on them, thinking, this team might crack 10 wins in 17-game season. You just don't know what's going to happen. But it's going to be a really important draft, and some of the guys they brought in for free agency it's not sexy guys by any means, but they're the right ones for this mold. That's all I can say, covering this team for so long.
So Drew Brees retires. We all knew it was coming. In your time covering the Saints or being a Saints fan, what was your favorite Drew Brees memory?
Man, I've got tons of them. Obviously, I think the record-breaking ones stand out the most. I think his 6 touchdown performance against San Francisco is one that I remember a lot. Even coming back against the Chiefs and doing the things that he did, even though they lost the game, I thought that was really something. But I think for me, the game against the Redskins, this 2017, the rookie season for Alvin Kamara, all those guys, right? They were just getting hammered by Washington. They went up on a touchdown by Jeremy Sprinkle. It looked like the game was just pretty much over, right? And Drew just found a way to march him down the field, not once but twice. They got defensive stands, and then they cap it off and win it in OT and all that stuff. And I think for me, that just kind of epitomized what Drew was able to do, and silenced so many critics just because of his surgical precision is what I like to say. That's one of them that comes out because everybody can talk about the records, the game where he went, missed one pass against the Colts in Monday Night Football. But I mean, look, it is definitely unfortunate that more people didn't get to see him in his final season. But I'm eternally grateful that I was able to see him play in all his games in his final year.
I mean, what was it? 20, not 20 years. It was about 18 years of Drew Brees.
Yeah, 2006. So, I mean, for about 15 roughly. Okay. Yeah, 15 seasons. Yeah, but total, since he's in the league, I mean, you're looking at 20 plus years. So, I mean, it's he's always going to be remembered for just all the things that he's been able to do in his career. And he's obviously a first ballot Hall of Famer. I mean, this is his guy. He just gives so much to so many, and his legacy is going to be felt long past when he retires.
So the moves they made, the cuts, I don't have all of them with me, but there were a lot, couple of trades, tons of new faces out the door and to new teams, that is. So you mentioned some of the moves that were expected. Were there any moves that you think they should have made that they didn't?
I don't know if about moves. The only thing I would have said is trying to keep Janoris Jenkins. I think that would have been the one that I would have preferred them to see. I think Quan Alexander, with the way his roster, his bonus and all that, it was just no way they were going to be able to absorb it, especially a guy coming off of injury. And I think they understood that. Offensively, Emmanuel Sanders brought a lot of good things to this team, but unfortunately he was one that, hey, look, it moves on for greener pastures. It goes to Buffalo. So that's not really that expected. I think the big ones that hurt was the one with Terry Fontenot moving from the front office, going to the Falcons. That obviously is going to be really good for them. Losing some of the coaches. Dan Campbell was one of those behind the scenes guys that didn't get a lot of accolades, and he did extremely good things here in New Orleans. I think he's going to do great in Detroit. I hope so for that franchise's organization. They need somebody that can come in here and kind of run things like he is able to do. Aaron Glenn was a guy that was under the radar. I think he's going to be missed. I mean, there's just so many that fell off from the front office to the coaching and to also the players. But, for me, you lose Jared Cook. That was expected. Josh Hill, that was a little bit of a surprise in the fact that he just landed on his feet so quickly. But again, Dan Campbell ties, right? So that's not too surprising for me. But I think, again, the one, when I look across it, Sheldon Rankins was another one. I think that was expected too. Cutting Malcolm Brown was another one that was expected. So, so yeah, it has to be the Janoris Jenkins moves, just because that leaves a huge void at corner, and they don't have anybody on the roster right now. They can play opposite him, Lattimore, on a full-time basis that's going to be able to do what he did.
So there were a ton of smoke screens about Jameis and Taysom. Seems like they're going to go with Jameis because they did that whole new contract thing with Taysom with, 4 void years. People were so confused. And then they re-signed Jameis, I think a day or so later. Are you comfortable with Jameis being the starter? And also, are you a Taysom Hill believer like we all think Sean Payton is?
Well, let me start with the second question. I don't believe Taysom Hill's, unless he makes a huge leap, he's not going to be the starting quarterback for this team. And I look at last season, right, which is your sample size, and you can't count that game against the Broncos because that was an unprecedented situation. You can't really say that much, right? Okay, they won, blah, 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 all this other stuff. So you're looking at the 2 games against the Falcons and then the game against Philly. The game against Philly, he was horrible. They did not play up to standards. Atlanta was a mixed bag. And, the only problem with him is his – it's a couple of them. I'm not saying it's just one little problem, but it's his progression, it's his reads, his decision-making, just a split second too late. And the thing is, when you watch him, his windup, he takes just a little bit more of a delay when he winds up. If you ever watch him on film, his little windup is just a little bit more, and that's kind of gets a little bit in trouble. Where you see is someone like Jameis who's got more of a natural release on his ball, if you will. And so, look, I think Taysom Hill can clean up a lot of parts of his game. I think he can do extremely well. Is he a starter? Is he the future like everybody was led to believe? I don't think so right now, especially move with Jameis. And the thing is, they're not invested to either one of them past this season. So with Jameis Winston, I mean, this is his opportunity to win this gig for sure. I think he's got what it takes, and the thing is, this is, following him from when he first got to New Orleans and to now, just complete demeanor change on his attitude. He got LASIK surgery. Obviously, that's a huge thing. That helps his vision that everybody wanted to clown him for. And look, the other part is he changed up his diet. He went kind of vegan, plant-based, and he looks slim and trim. He looks great. And I think he has what it takes to lead this team and to be able to do it. I don't think it's going to be Drew Brees-esque. And in talking with him recently, we had a conference call with him. Is that look? He's only focused on being the best he can. He's not trying to compare himself and say, I got to go beat Drew Brees or anything. I just got to beat Jameis Winston and lead this team. So I think we're in for a pretty good fun ride. I think with the mechanics part and the turnovers, that'll work itself out. I still think he's going to throw some. Obviously, no quarterback's inept from that, but I would expect it to drastically come down from 30 and be a problem what plagued this team or plagued the Bucs when he was there. So I feel really good about his direction. And so he's got some good weapons with him, core nucleus, a great offensive line so far. And so, I mean, he's got all the pieces there to at least start somewhere and try to help bring New Orleans to ultimate goal, which is try to get another championship there.
Right. And with Taysom, the contract isn't going to hurt the Saints unless he's there past, year one, year two. And Jameis, we haven't seen him since he got that surgery. And you mentioned the 30 picks. That's going to go down just because they're not going to be passing the ball as much as Tampa did in 2019. But specifically for Jameis, not playing for a year. Yeah, he threw that touchdown pass against Tampa. That was a cool play. But not having played for a year, how do you think he comes back? Because he's been working with the system during 2020, just didn't play. So what kind of Jameis Winston do you think we're going to see in 2021?
I think you're going to see a little bit more calm and a more focused Jameis Winston. I feel like, again, he's got a better run game support than he did in Tampa. So you got Latavius Murray and Alvin Kamara. Kamara, we know who he is. Latavius Murray, I think, is one of the most underrated second complement backs in the league, if not the most, right? And you've got you're going to expect a big bounce back year from Michael Thomas. And then, they are putting a lot of faith in guys like Adam Troutman and a second year leap to make a huge sophomore jump, if you will, because he's a third round pick. You don't have Josh Hill. You got rid of Jared Cook. You bring Nick Vannett in. I think he could be more active in this offense too. But, look, I think that bodes well for him because, if you pick up some things and semblances of what Winston liked, he liked to throw it to OJ Howard and Cameron Brate, and Troutman's in for a good year. And so I think, between the backfield and obviously the offensive line with guys like Ryan Ramczyk and Teron Armstead being your bookends, if you will. And then the interior is always the concern. McCoy's not the concern. It's Andres Pete on the left side really is what most people talk about. And then on the right side, there were some growing pains with Cesar Ruiz, but I think he's going to be much better this season. So as long as he can work with some of these other targets, because I think really what's concerning is who's their number 2 option as a receiver. Traquan Smith is a guy in the contract year. I think he can grow more. We'll see. He's more known probably for his blocking and primarily what he's used for. I think Marquez Callaway, a second-year guy, is more poised for a breakout season. But, there's just so many variables there. But ultimately, I think Jameis is going to come out. He's going to be smart with the ball. He's not going to have to do everything himself. And ultimately, he's going to have a really good defense behind him that is going to help him out and try to hopefully give him some bigger opportunities to put points up on the board for New Orleans.
Yeah, so there were a couple of trade rumors about Ryan Ramczyk, about them maybe wanting to move on. His contract's coming up. Just deny that real quick for me.
Yeah, I'd never heard of that one. Ramczyk's in 5th-year option. They love him at right tackle. He's their future. They're going to get some type of contract extension. There is absolutely 100% no way they trade Ryan Ramczyk.
I mean, he was one of those players in the 2017 class, and just a couple weeks ago, I'm a Bengals fan. Getting Trey Hendrickson, obviously, whatever. I mean, I like Carl Lawson, but I'll take Trey Hendrickson. I didn't even know that he was part of that class too. Like, there's 5 guys who are going to get. Well, Kamara already got one. Trey Hendrickson got a second contract. Like, 5 guys that are going to get big second contracts from either the Saints or someone else. And that's, I mean, like that class, I compare it to the 2018 Colts. It's probably better, as I've said for years that that class extended their window for a couple more years. And obviously they didn't win a championship, but it extended their window for another 3-4 years. Like Lattimore's a top 10 corner in the league. Obviously Kamara, Ramczyk, getting him at the top of the second round, I believe. So crazy draft class there. But the Saints haven't been able to get a huge playoff win and string multiple together since the Super Bowl run, obviously. Now with the cap situation, the roster turnover, a couple of players coming up for extensions, how do they get back to playoffs, and how close are we till their window closes?
Yeah, I mean, first and foremost, look, I mean, I know there's an element. Tampa's the favorite, right? Tampa's, even though Saints have won it 4 straight in the division, and Tampa kind of settled and had the last laugh in the playoff game. But, look, they're going to just have to focus on doing the best they can with what they have. And, I've kind of thought and looked over the schedule opponents. I think it's still favorable. I don't know if I'd say they're going to be a 13-win team or a 14-win team or anything crazy like that. I think maybe 10 or 11 is the ceiling for this team right now, just based off of all the things that we have. And that's probably being really generous, just because we haven't seen them address their needs at corner, their needs at linebacker, their other need at wide receiver. But, you still have a lot of depth. You still have Sean Payton as a coach. And I think ultimately, you might have to sneak in as a wild card here and maybe try to play some road games and stuff. But, you mentioned the 2017 draft class too, just going back off that right quick. Hendrickson was a beast, and I hope he continues to play. He's an interesting guy, and I it's so good to see him succeed. I think of that class, the only one that really didn't live up to their expectations was Alex Anzalone, third-round pick, the linebacker from Florida. And then, even one of the guys they got late, Al-Qadim Muhammad, he didn't finish really with the Saints, but he found himself a gig with the Colts and stuff. And so, I mean, overall, they hit on pretty much all their picks except maybe one. But, going back to the other thing, I think the Saints are still going to be a somewhat contender, probably one that people are going to sleep on a little bit more. And I get it, because you don't have Brees, you don't have this, you don't have that. You lost a lot of people. But, that's probably their best space to play in right now is to be maybe not the favorite for the South, maybe not the favorites as a Super Bowl. Let them come from behind, see what happens, because nobody really knows what to expect from this team. But anything that would say they're just going to fall flat on their face, I'd absolutely laugh, because that's just not going to happen with the talent they have.
You've talked about a couple of times the importance of this year's draft. Saints are picking at 28, 60, 98, 105, and 133. 4 picks in the top 105. Really solid for a team that made the second round of the playoffs. I'll start with this. So pick 28. Before Mac Jones became potentially a top 5 pick, I was consistently targeting him to New Orleans. Do you think that dream is dead? And where do you think the Saints stand on potentially going quarterback in the first couple of rounds?
I would be highly shocked to see a quarterback. I think the only 2 positions that would probably infuriate me would be an offensive lineman or drafting a quarterback in any of those top rounds. And I don't see it. And again, like I said earlier, Winston and Hill, you're only really committed him for this year financially, right? So after this year, you just don't know. So could they draft a quarterback? Absolutely. Do they have to? I don't think so, for sure. But, looking at their needs, I think they just got other needs for a corner, linebacker. Those are the 2 most glaring needs, because you don't have anybody, a stud next to Demario Davis. I think there's a lot of Chase Hansen buzz, but he's virtually an unknown. And at corner, I mean, besides Lattimore, you have Patrick Robinson, who's an older veteran. I don't think he's going to play full-time snaps. And you got PJ Williams and some other options. And I just don't think that option is on the roster right now. And so for me, if I had to rank, I'd say linebacker and corner. Those are probably your first 2. I don't expect New Orleans to stay put. Their tendencies show that they're going to trade up. They're going to find somebody. I don't think if they come out of here with 8 picks that they have, then I'll be really shocked. I think they're going to come out more like 5 or 6 total. And I expect them to move up in one of those rounds to try to get some of those players that they feel that are going to do it. But, I'd say this, never say never when it comes to quarterback talks. I don't know who, and the other part of it, you don't know how the board's going to fall out. You're going to have people that dip that everybody says, oh, this guy's definitely top 15. You're going to have guys that are like, this guy wasn't even on our board, we need top 50 and he's gone already. So it's all in the team's valuations process and all that good stuff. But look, I don't know if the dream's dead, but I think they feel really good about Jameis and Taysom battling it out. So I would really be surprised for them to take a quarterback in the first two rounds, maybe third. You might start a case for it.
So pick 28, night one. You mentioned linebacker. You mentioned corner. Linebacker is probably more towards the sweet spot at 28. There's the top three corners. If you want to add Greg Newsom to that tier one, I will, but some people don't like that. But so pick 28. Who are some of the guys that you think they should target at those two positions if they do stay at 28?
Yeah, look, I think Newsom and Farley, Caleb Farley, obviously he's going to dip a little bit, but I think because of his medical concerns, right? I think that would be an interesting pick for him. Linebacker, I mean, again, it just depends on how the mock. If you look at mocks, then guys like Zaven Collins and Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah is falling too. John Davis is a name that's rising up too. J.C. Horn's a popular name, although I'm not sure about his next level success, just because I think he's going to whatever team he lands with. Especially, I guess it was Saints too, but it he's going to get called for a lot of holding and different things. I just don't know. It's a hard thing. Asante Samuel Jr., very interesting, intriguing prospect. I just don't know if he's worth taking up there all the way at 28, more of a day two pick, right? But, looking at that, I think those are mostly the guys that most people have talked about. It's Newsom, it's Farley, it's Owusu-Koramoah, it's also Zaven Collins. I think if I'm looking at that, I'd be happy with just about any of those picks. But they could make a crazy play if they wanted to try to draft up and get a Patrick Surtain Jr. You know what I mean? I think that would be a home run, if you will, and it's going to take a lot of capital to do it. But they have a need, and I could see them trading up based off of that need and not worrying about all the other picks and worrying about next year to kind of do this thing.
So they have Marcus Davenport, they have Cameron Jordan, obviously, and a lot of people, including myself, I've been a little bit non-crazy about Trey Hendrickson because a lot of those sacks, arguably cleanup duty from Davenport and Cameron Jordan, but they have those two players. Do you think they're going to try to replace Trey Hendrickson, or do you think that they feel confident with the people on the roster?
Well, and that's what I tell a lot of people, right? Hendrickson, I mean, he had a fantastic season, right? And I was good to see him. Crazy, it's in a contract year. I knew New Orleans wasn't going to be able to keep him. And I thought the priority was more on Marcus Williams, and that's why they franchised him. But I think a deal can get done there. But, my whole counterpoint and argument was you're paying Cam Jordan and Marcus Davenport to do the work, right? And so you're going to need more production out of Davenport. You're going to need more production out for Cam Jordan. I mean, he definitely had a down season. I don't think by any stretch of the imagination was he bad. And if you look at Davenport, he grades out good in the analytics department. So a guy they're really high on is Carl Granderson to kind of fill up that role. He's an undrafted guy. He has shown a lot of promise. I think he had 5.5 sacks last season, doing some of the duty. So I think he's going to step up. They signed Tano Passignon. I think that's another one that you want to look at. And you brought back Noah Spence. I know he's kind of more of an injury. He's a wild card, and saying that he's going to make the roster now is just because he's a veteran is probably not fair to him, but he's coming off a major injury. But, they do have some pieces there that are interesting at least. So I think they can get that third rotational guy from what they have on the roster. It wouldn't surprise me if they drafted one though, at some point, or just bring him in through undrafted process. But, I feel like you got what you got on the roster, and you're paying people to affect the quarterback enough. So I don't know if there's need to really go find somebody else or have to say, let's go shoot for the moon and get some of these guys.
So looking later towards the draft, let's round 2, 3. They have a couple extra picks. You mentioned linebacker. You mentioned corner. Any other positions? Because maybe edge, because it's a very good edge class. So are there any other positions that you can see them maybe stacking up on with some of those extra picks on day 2 and 3?
Yeah, I'd like to see a wide receiver first and foremost. I know Rondell Moore is a popular one. Purdue is one that talked about something, a slot receiver. I think, because Jameis or Taysom gives the Saints a element that they really haven't had in a while. It's the ability to stretch the field. And I think you'll see a lot more bombs from Winston, or a lot more aggressive tendencies there. So I'd like to see something like that. I could make the case for a defensive lineman, interior guy, because David Onyemata he's stellar. Shy Tuttle and Malcolm Roach are undrafted guys, but they're going to play more this season. Obviously, there's a need there. That's why even a wild card pick, a Christian Barmore, as a first round pick wouldn't surprise me just because of what they have. But they're going to have somebody a true nose. And I think Roach and Tuttle will be guys that can kind of fill in that. And, guys like Maurice Hurst came available, Sheldon Richardson came available. So there's still avenues they could pursue after the draft. So just because they don't draft one doesn't mean they don't have a plan, right? And so I would be intrigued to see what happens. But for me, I definitely look at wide receiver. I'd look at defensive linemen. I don't think you can have too many linebackers on this team. And, look, I think you're going to have to end up getting another type of safety at corner. I mean, you're not going to have enough people in the secondary. So that's something that you might double up on, even if you draft one of your corners with 28th or 60th.
So going back to 28 for a second, if they do stay there, and before I let you go, I do this with everybody that comes on here. Let's say Newsome is there. Probably won't be, but Greg Newsome is there, Zaven Collins is there, and Jamin Davis is there as well. And then Kwity Paye is there if they want to go edge. Who is your pick? And if you want, also Jock is there. Awusu Kamara is also there. So who's your pick?
I like Awusu Kamara. So I just love his film. And, I think a lot of people, because I've seen, you read scouting profiles and it's crazy. Just one of the things I read, I'm not going to call out the person, but, they say he's more of a hybrid safety linebacker type guy. But when you compared him to somebody like a Quan Alexander, there's only an inch difference. So he's an inch taller and he's like 7 pounds lighter than Quan. So it's like, when I look at stuff like that, I'm like, is that going to make a big difference in the next level? I don't think so. I think his run support and his lane integrity is really what's going to be important. I think he gives an element where being able to cover the flats and obviously just he's a good hitter. It's always good to see. But look, I think he's a game changer. I think he's the Jalen Smith type guy, the Luke Kuechly type guy, the Leighton Vander Esch when he's healthy. I think he's just the ability to change. And I look at Devin White from the Bucks, and I'm a huge LSU fan, and it kills me to see guys like him and Debo Jones that just do so well. And that's why I lean more to linebackers, just because I think it's such a game changing spot. And the fact is, if you look at that playoff game against Tampa, they ate up the Saints in the short to intermediate spot. And it was because of their linebacker play. Alex Anzalone did not have a good game. He was getting beat. He was getting chipped too much. He just was not in position right. And so, look, Demario Davis is a stud. He's going to do fantastic for you. Get a linebacker that can complement his game and then just be able to worry about what happens with the corner, because I still think that there's plenty of veterans out there on the corner market that they could solve that need. Richard Sherman's popular, obviously, but, you got Casey Hayward, obviously, Bashad Breeland, guys that you can fill in that'll be serviceable if you still decide that you want to draft somebody.
Yep. Awesome stuff from John. John, thanks so much for coming on.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate you doing this, definitely. And so it's cool to see Mizzou in the background and Bengals fan. So look, you'll have a fan of me, Joe Burrow. And I love Joe Burrow. I hope he gets Jamar Chase. There's one of those guys, and they can light up the stage like they did at LSU.
Yeah, and you mentioned LSU. I was at the game, the Mizzou LSU game back in October. Probably the highlight of my freshman year so far, I would say. I know not so much for you because, LSU, they were still ranked at the time and then kind of went all downhill from there. But Once again, thanks for coming on. Make sure to follow John on Twitter at John J. Hendrix. Thank you guys for listening and watching this episode of 32 Teams in 32 Days, and I'll catch you in the next one.